Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the A to Z BizLink podcast, Quarantine Edition. Today, we have the founder and CEO of Structures for Success, Ms. Wendy McClellan, joining us. Wendy, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate you adapting as things have slightly changed in our business world. And I thought you would be a phenomenal person to bring on for an episode because you are working so closely with a lot of businesses here in town as they're navigating COVID-19. So before we dive into that conversation, Wendy, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about your background and what exactly you do?
Sure. So again, thank you for inviting me to the quarantine edition. I kind of like this. So what Structure for Success is we are an HR consulting team. So we handle everything that has to do with a business's human capital, whether it's scaling, as in hiring, whether it's firing, whether lately it's been RIFs and layoffs, just really the strategic planning that goes into anything that goes around their people. So if they have anything to do with their people, lots of questions, that's what we do. I have been in leadership for longer than I care to admit, since the early 90s. I was in the mortgage field. So I was the one that they brought in to either clean up an office. For a while, I felt like a janitor, or set up the office, hire everybody. So when that bubble burst, I got that experience too. So I've been down the road a couple times. So that's kind of my experience in a nutshell.
Well, and I know you do so much for different businesses. So you did provide a very humble intro to yourself. For those individuals that want to learn a little bit more, we encourage you to check out our Resources for Growth publication because Wendy is actually featured in there. And it also includes her contact information. So after today's conversation, if you're like, I need Wendy in my life, now you know where to find that info. But as we're talking, big picture, I'm just curious, what trends are you seeing on the business front now that we're navigating COVID-19?
That is an excellent question. So the obvious answer is, in the beginning, we were navigating remote work options. So it was like, okay, if you were not necessarily essential, but had the capability, your people could work at home. It was really navigating what does that look like, taking your current policy, which was more of an exception and not the rule, and actually making it the rule. And this is how things went. The big thing that we were navigating though was fear. And it wasn't really it was the fear of, oh my God, what's going to happen to my business? And the fear of from the employees going, I don't want to go to work. So my clients range from pet salons to attorneys' offices to accountants' office. So there was a lot in there that was essential. There's a lot that in there that weren't. So, my med spa is closed. So it was really navigating all of that and figuring out what kind of communication went along with that. How did they trust their people to do what needed to get done, what absolutely needed to get done, how to keep everybody focused, and especially those that had children, because the care facilities are closed. So, and a 3-year-old doesn't necessarily understand that when mommy or daddy is home, that doesn't mean that it's playtime. So it was navigating really all of that and figuring out what companies needed to do at that point in time. And now the trend is, okay, how do I get everybody back in? What is this going to look like? How is this going to happen? Do I, what safety precautions do I need to make? And how do I do that? What does that look like?
I don't think any business owner or business leader was prepared to go through this. But in a way, I feel like COVID-19 has been a bit of a blessing because it's caused us to think through different elements of our business that we haven't necessarily had to spend a lot of time on. So as we've had these conversations, I'm curious, how are people changing the way that they do business for the long term? And then also, I would love to know a little bit more about how are you helping businesses now to plan, above and beyond COVID-19?
Good question. So people, I keep saying it was a gift in a odd kind of way, because it was a chance for a lot of businesses to reset. So I was working with one of my clients who had an offer in on this huge building, this huge facility. They were going to, expand and do all this. And then they had to send everybody home. And they were kind of like, okay, I don't need this big of a footprint. This actually works. You know how much money I'm going to save? So it was a chance for them to really look at what did they want and reassess their goals. And the timing actually came at a good time, because it was the beginning of second quarter. So I don't know about anybody else out there, but my first quarter goals were like, I might as well have not written them down, because they didn't even matter, right? So I had to sit down personally and say, okay, what do I need? How can I help? What is needed? And do that for my business, so then I was kind of able to guide other people through. So a lot of people have discovered that they don't either need as big of a footprint. They have discovered who can work at home and who cannot. They have discovered what analytics are at their fingertips and how to read them. So that has been what I am navigating through with my clients, is they'll call me and I'll say, okay, so let's actually pull this. Oh, I can do that. Okay, so this is how I do that, or this is what I'm going to do from here on out. So I think there was a second part to the question that I forgot, but that.
Well, I mean, gosh, I just feel like I have so many questions for you. I mean, especially the analytics part, because I feel like so many more businesses now are really focused on the data and the statistics to support making the decisions that they do. Is that something that you've formally really focused on with local leaders, or is that something that you have recently brought back to the forefront because we're going through, quarantine or whatnot?
I think it's a combination, because data is very important, but what I always tell everybody is you cannot manage by spreadsheets. It doesn't work. So the data is important, but this is not a financial crisis. This is a human crisis. So we need to take the human aspect into consideration. So when we see the data, so like I was working with one of my clients and they're like, well, this person is usually really productive. They're not. I'm like, well, what conversation have you had with them? Well, they hadn't. So that's the first place to start. So I'm finding a balance between them. So what I have noticed with my clients is I will ask for the data and they're kind of like, oh yeah, I need that. They're used to flying by the seat of their pants and making from the hip decisions, because everything was so busy and so crazy. And now they're able to kind of sit back and go, okay, well, why are they doing this? Which then, of course, some of the employees are like, well, now why are you questioning me? So again, it's all about the balance. But I am reminding a lot of my clients that the data is there. We just need to figure out how to collect it and how to read it, and then translate it. What does it mean?
And that leads me into, how do you think leadership styles or approaches have had to change as we've been navigating this?
That is an excellent question. Leadership styles are very, very different now. You have to, if you didn't see yourself as a leader before, suddenly you are. It was like, no, I'm just the owner, you have to make the effort now, I think, for leadership. So what I'm telling my clients is you have to be visible. So what used to be a monthly meeting is now a weekly meeting on Zoom. And even more than that, what I'm telling people is it's daily. It's at least, they're like, that's too much. Okay, fine. Then it's at least twice a week. Monday, let's plan these tasks out, because the biggest part of leadership right now, in my opinion, is keeping them focused on something. So bring them back to your mission. What is your big thing? Is it clients first? Is it taking care of people? Is it supporting some, whatever it is, bring them back to that mission and keep them focused on that, because otherwise they're going to be focused on fear and uncertainty, and you don't want that. You want to keep them productive. So give them something to focus on, and the best way to do that is to be in front of them.
And with that, time and energy management is another component, because as you're trying to help all of your team members navigate this, you're also trying to do it yourself. So, from that perspective, I'm curious, what would you encourage leaders to really focus or commit their time towards doing on a daily or weekly basis?
That part for me hasn't changed because I'm always telling people to focus first on their people. Because without their people, they're not going to have the clients. So, really focus on your people. What do they need? And more importantly, communicating. There is no such thing right now as over communicating. It is, and it's not just let's just shoot an easy email. No, it's a let's have a conversation, pick up the phone. Because as the remote stuff rolled out, the employees needed to understand in the beginning that they needed to be just as accessible as if they were down the hall, right? And that's where most business owners were doing, is they were spending all their time going down the hall to check on this or do this or field client calls or whatever. And depending on what their business is, those client calls might not be coming in, but then that gives them the opportunity to really focus on their people, to focus on what needs to get done, to clean out the old pipeline, to revisit certain things, and just engage their people more so that they want to come back and they want to keep working towards that mission.
We've spent a lot of time in this conversation so far focused on businesses and those individuals that are currently employed, but the latest stats are saying that 1 in 7 people currently are without a job. So that is the largest number that I think any of us have ever seen. And so I'm curious, what advice would you have for those individuals that are actively seeking new opportunities?
I think it depends on what field they're in, because a lot of these people, in my experience with who I have been talking with, are temporarily unemployed. So this is not a forever instance. Their business is going to open back up sometime, right? So they're going to have another job. However, there's a lot of frustration because the systems are the same as when I applied for unemployment in 2008 when it blew up. They added one other question. That's great. That doesn't help me. Where's the place where I can explain it, right? So they're frustrated that they can't do these types of things, explain what's going on. So if they're truly looking to get back to work sooner rather than later, and maybe they don't have the option to go back into where they were before, assess what they're good at, because maybe this is the reset for them to go into a completely different avenue, because people are going to be hiring out there. Businesses are going to be looking, and a server, let's say, has got excellent customer service skills. They know how to talk to anybody, and they can balance literally and figuratively. So how can you apply that to another job? So that's kind of take your perspective and flip it a little bit, or maybe just tweak it and see what else you really want to do. Maybe this is not to be too Pollyanna, but maybe this is a great opportunity for you to do that shift that you were looking to do.
No, I think that's some really great advice. So I know in your role, there are a lot of different tools and resources out there. I'm curious, which ones commonly pop up, or which ones you often refer to your clients?
Oh, wow. There are a lot of resources, but there's not a clear path for resources right now. So and I'll give you an example. So there's a lot of the PPP loan stuff that's going on out there, and they're like, do I get funded? Do I do this? Okay, great. I got my money. How do I do this? What do I do? I can give them advice because I'm getting those phone calls. However, I am not an accountant. I'm not a loan officer. I can only tell you what my loan officer and what my accountant told me. So that's kind of, look at who is in your circle. Maybe it's just a peer, maybe it's somebody you met at networking, but ask them, just ask those questions. I have been referring, like I said, a lot of people back to their loan officer, back to their accountant. In that particular situation for unemployment, it's like, I don't know. Let's try this. Let's do this. Let's, let's see. And it's trying to talk to other people in your industry to find out what they're doing. This is, instead of being so worried about competition right now, it's more about, okay, collaboration. How can we all work together? And the other resource that I'm telling people to use are their clients. Call their clients. What do they need help with? Because that is going to be a huge resource for them to figure out how to pivot their services. What do you have that you could change to support what they need right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, if you can go back and ask your clients direct, what do you need, and figure out solutions on how you can help, I feel like that's a win-win across the board for all parties.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, how are you personally staying well during quarantine? What are some of your personal best practices?
My personal best practices go back to it always feels very selfish, but to taking care of myself first. So to me, I am very fortunate because my days have been frantic and busy and never ending, and the phone's constantly ringing, and that's great. Doesn't mean equate to a lot of income, but it's still busy, right? So in order to be able to do that, I've had to stick to my morning routine, which is, the 2-mile walk, because otherwise I'd weigh 400 pounds now. The the writing in my journal and getting those feelings out. The spending time with family, the whatever it takes for you to feel grounded in the morning, so that you can set the rest of your day up for success, and to not fall into the trap, for me personally, that, okay, this is a vacation. This is, or in my case, this is, you're working so hard. This is not a vacation. So so this is not the time to drink those 3 bottles of wine, no matter how good they look. That's not going to escape. You're just going to feel tired the next morning. So just really taking care of yourself and remembering this is not normal, and this is not the new normal. So when that happens to me, it's not about, okay, we're going to take this one day at a time. It's we're going to take this 1 hour at a time. What do I need to focus on for just this hour? This is the one thing I'm going to get done. And then next I'll start on that, instead of trying to do 15 things at once.
Sounds like you definitely have some great strategies to set yourself up for success. And I know you're setting up a lot of businesses for success here in the business community as well. But just to further clarify, I'm curious, what types of businesses or business leaders do you feel like you could help the most?
That's a great question. The people that I can help the most are the ones who are open to listening. Especially in the beginning, the end of February, beginning of March, I got a lot of people who called me who didn't necessarily want help, who wanted me to tell them something. And when I either didn't have the answer because the answer wasn't out there, or I gave them the answer and they didn't like it, they were very angry. That comes from fear, and I get that. I'm not judging or shaming or any of that. That's the way, that's a reality. So now the people that I can help the most are the ones that are willing to listen and to not be so caught up in the way, this is the way we used to do things, because that's not going to work right now. They have to be open to different ways of communicating, leading, structuring things, creating policies, all of that kind of, and they have to be willing to talk it through.
And are you commonly helping small business owners, or are they larger corporations?
I work generally with small to mid. So, however, this has brought out everybody that I've ever worked with in the last 8 years. So yes, have I been working with some small businesses? Absolutely. Have I helped them personally file for unemployment? Absolutely. But my sweet spot is anywhere between 10 employees and 45. I've got some obvious, I've got some on both ends of that scale, but that's the sweet spot, because the owner kind of realizes at that point that I can't do this all by myself anymore. And what am I supposed to be doing? And how can I go back to doing what I enjoy? So that's where I can really come in and help put those processes in place, put the people strategy in place, and help take a lot of that off of the owner's shoulders. So, and those are the people that are really having to do a lot of reevaluation now too, because a lot of times when you're in a growth spurt, you throw people at it and they're like, okay, I just realized I can function with half the people that I have. Now what do I do with that information? So that's really where I can kind of help them figure out where to reassess and realign everything.
So I know individuals can find you within our Resources for Growth publication, but would you mind just sharing what the name of your website is and other forms that people can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So my website is www.structure4success.com. I am on LinkedIn under Structure for Success, as well as my own personal page. My office number is 480, and I always have to look, 305-0761. I've got a Facebook page as well, so they can find me on social media and the website, or just give me a call. And there's a calendar link on my website. So, there's a 20-minute discovery call. You just have a quick question. That's what I'm here. I'm honestly just here to help people navigate through this.
Wendy, as we look to wrap up today's conversation, are there any other closing thoughts or remarks that you would like to leave our audience with?
Oh, wow. Yes, to just be grace, to just give yourself some grace. There's no such thing as perfection. This is stretching and challenging and shifting everyone out there. So give yourself some grace, give some other people some grace. And if you're having a rough day, really look back at what you're grateful for.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we all need to hear that from time to time. Wendy, thanks again for joining us for today's quarantine edition of the A to Z BizLink podcast.
Thank you so much.